Welcome to Toy Business Unboxed, your gateway to the secrets of the toy industry. Here, Jason Shea, a toy entrepreneur and expert in the field.
Every product we develop is really inspired by some of the real life experience that we have with our son.
60% of all toys last year were sold on Amazon, which is incredible.
Be passionate about it because it's a road, it's a journey.
Like when you have an idea that you think is like gonna somewhat like change the world, make things better, I'd say go for it.
We'll guide you through the enchanting world of toy design, marketing, and manufacturing. Now let the unboxing begin.
Welcome back to Toy Business Unboxed. Today's guest is Chase, a filmmaker turned game designer whose original IP, The World of Kylia, spanned comic, animation, and trading card games. Chase's journey started with a film camera at age of 16 and since then have evolved into multimedia universe, really built on rich storytelling and interactive design. In this particular episode, we'll be chatting about game development and what it takes to really build your own world from scratch and how the fan can really play a big part in shaping the future of your business within the toys and game industry. Thank you so much for being on our show today, Chase.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So first of all, can you share with our audience like a little bit about your background? Like I mentioned in the intro, you have a huge background in filmmaking. Can you kind of talk about your journey so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right. When I was 16, I started a film production company called IQ Pictures. Originally, it was just a way for me to do like small commercials with friends or family that needed, filmmaking help. And as I developed the project and the company, I ended up going to college and learning more about filmmaking. I was a film making major at Loyola Marymount. I had an amazing time, met some great friends. And I did a lot of commercial work in California, did a little bit of music videos and commercials, did a live action film. And then during COVID, at the start of it, Hollywood basically shut down. So a lot of us had nothing to do, and I had an interest in animation. So I decided to teach myself Blender and started picking up 3D modeling and animation gigs. And then as I was developing my skill set there, I realized that there had been an idea that I had been working on since high school, and I kind of wanted to turn that into a full-time job later on. And COVID seemed like the best time because I had all the time in the world and nothing else to do. So I ended up developing and putting it out on social media. And then now I'm here as a full-time game designer, animator, and creative director.
Where is the idea come from behind the world building that you have
Sure.
currently?
When I was young, I watched a lot of movies. And in high school, my senior year, I took a trip to Hawaii, and I had just learned about the Dune franchise, Frank Herbert's Dune, and and this is before they did the remakes. This was like originally the book and then the older movies. And I fell in love with it. I had been a huge fan of Star Wars. Things like the Twilight Zone were also huge inspirations for me. And as I was kind of developing out this sci-fi world, the original idea is I wanted to make feature film set in this universe. But then I quickly realized upon going to college that the budgeting of a project like that would be borderline impossible because I'd have to get like hundreds of millions of dollars as a 20-year-old.
That's true.
So I knew it was impossible. So I thought, I'd seen other people. There's an animator called Ian Hubbard who was a big inspiration for me. And he was doing his own animation on YouTube and did small tutorials teaching people how to learn Blender and how they could turn their projects into real life. And I was like, okay, maybe this is something that I could teach myself how to do and, turn into a job.
I see. And can you talk about this world of Kylia that you're building? What is in it? What kind of character? What is the kind of the worldview?
Absolutely. Yeah. So Kylia is a sci-fi fantasy universe. So think of like similar to Star Wars where they have, the ability to fly. There's, science things like ray guns and stuff like that. But at a certain point in their history, there was an event called the Fall in which society kind of regressed back to kind of like more of a fantastical age where you're kind of in a dark age. So rather than having access to technology, like everyone just has it at default, they have to discover it through ruins and ancient artifacts and stuff. So to them, it's the same as magic because if you were in, 1700 and someone just pulled up in a spaceship, you'd be like, okay, they're a magic person. They can fly. Okay. So that's a little bit about Kylia. And then one of the main projects we're working on right now is our comic book series, which should be coming out later this year, which
Cool.
kind of has more of a traditional storyline, where it follows one character and his journey throughout the planet, discovering a lot of the ancient history of the world and kind of how they got to the point they're at. So yeah.
I see. So there is a whole project to build a world that you currently have. But
Yeah.
how does that idea turning into a trading card game?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I started working on the project, one of the things that I quickly realized was filmmaking is amazing. It's,
Yeah.
where I grew up. I love that. It's probably what I'll be doing for the rest of my life. But one of
Mhm.
the downsides of that as an art form or as a medium is as soon as you deliver the film, the process kind of ends. Like you show
Mm,
someone your narrative story, they can, take it, they can come up with theories, but at a certain point there's just kind of no more to discuss with the topic.
mm,
And I wanted to build a world that allowed people who also liked similar things in this kind of sci-fi fantasy genre to
mhm.
make their own characters and be able to tell their own stories.
I
And not
see.
everyone is going to have the skill set and the time to like learn how to animate and tell their own stories. So I wanted to come up with a format that allowed people to make their own characters and really like
Mm,
build out the world that I was building alongside me.
mhm.
And as I was talking to my friends, it seemed like a trading card game was probably the easiest format to do that. We
Okay.
had talked
Okay.
about maybe doing a video game, but then again, the same thing is like a movie. It's so
Higher
expensive to
budget.
develop.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we ended
True.
up doing a couple art competitions and meeting some really talented artists.
I
And
see.
then the person who won our first art competition ended up being the creative director and he's the head illustrator of our project
Oh, wow.
for the
Okay.
visual side. So,
I
and that's
see. I
Colin.
see.
So yeah, he's amazing. And we ended up kind of transitioning a lot of the stuff that we had written for the
Mhm.
screen or for a comic book and
I
just
see.
reworking it into card game format to allow players the ability to, if they liked the genre or if they liked our project specifically, they could then take the cards and then make their own characters and then play against
Mhm.
each other in kind of an ever evolving storyline rather than just one set narrative.
I see. What has been some of the biggest challenge in turning the world
Yeah.
into the playable trading card game so far?
Yeah. I mean, there's been a couple of things that have been pretty difficult. One was there's a steep learning curve when anytime you go to a different genre or a different medium. I
Mm.
had a background in when I was a kid, I played a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! And I
Mm.
collected Pokemon. I never really understood. I don't know if anyone actually can play Pokemon.
I see.
I'm not
Yeah,
convinced it's a Mandela effect, but
I see.
I did collect Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! As a kid. So I knew a little bit about the trading card game space. But
Okay.
honestly, the manufacturing side and understanding the business of trading card games was
Mm.
probably the most difficult part.
Mm.
Whenever
Mm.
I talk to new designers or try to give them advice, I always say that like 10% is designing the game, the other 90% is getting it into customers' hands. So,
Mm, yeah, for sure.
it's very easy to say like, oh, let's just make a game where this happens, and that's cool. But then you have to figure out like, okay, will this work in a card game format? If people buy these cards, will they hold value?
Mm.
What GSM card stock are we using? What
Yeah.
barcodes? Like that was for me the biggest hurdle. And then
Mhm.
design wise, I think there was a brief moment initially where I was trying to come up with a game that felt unique compared to other games.
Okay.
There's definitely the idea that there's no new ideas under the sun. Everything is kind of borrowed from somewhere else. But
Yeah.
I really wanted to make a game where it felt like you were playing a new game rather than just a rehashing of something like Magic the Gathering or Pokemon.
I see.
So
Okay.
the initial development time was around 6 months of me just trying to figure out the base format of how
Format.
cards would function in our game.
Okay.
And I had
Okay.
10 cards and one D20, and that was it. That was the whole game. And then I
Mm.
ended up developing 85 total cards for our first set.
I
Um,
see. I
and the
see.
rest of
I
the
think you
development
have
was
some of the set with you if you can
yeah,
show the
absolutely.
audience that's watching.
Um, yeah, so these are our booster packs for set one. It's called
Mhm.
the Sakya Festival. And then here are the starter decks. This is my favorite Paragon specifically. It's
Mhm.
called Calidus, and it's all about transmutation. So
Okay.
taking inorganic things and changing them and changing their properties. And
Mhm.
then for me, this is my favorite because it just looks awesome. And this is like our booster box.
Oh, okay,
So
okay.
being able to
I
hold
see.
this as a physical
Yeah.
thing is also amazing. Compared to
Mm.
coming from film, right? I can see it on a screen, but there's no like tangible nature to it.
Tangible
So
item,
when I
yeah.
have like any of my cards from my game like in my hand, and I know the story behind it, but I can almost feel it in my hand. It's an amazing feeling. So
Can you also explain the rule behind your version
sure.
compared so for our audience that also play other games like
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Pokemon, etc., so they understand the
So
difference?
our game differs from most TCGs in that a lot of TCGs kind of default to like a creature battler, which
Mm,
is where you have a bunch of independent cards that kind of act on your behalf, and you're kind of like this omniscient force. In
okay.
our game, it's a first-person card game. So
Yeah.
each card is a skill, ability, or weapon that you're learning to use throughout the course of the game,
Mm,
and it plays more like a traditional RPG rather than a TCG. So the idea
mm,
is you
okay.
can always do things in our game, and that's all decided by one of these. It's just a standard D20 dice.
Yeah.
And when you're trying to attack or run away, you roll a dice. And then as you learn abilities, you'll put cards down on the field, which give you bonuses to your rolls. So the
I
idea is basically you're learning skills, and then the more skillful you become, the easier it is to win rolls because you've kind of modified them to the point where, rolling a d20, you could get like a 3, you could get a 13. But if I have a
mm,
plus 15, it's very hard to lose a roll versus someone that doesn't have a plus 15. So it's a
mm.
very numbers based kind of traditional RPG kind of melded into a card game. So yeah.
I see, I see, I see. So what is the objective? Is it like gathering a certain amount of points, or how do you
Yeah.
win the games?
Yeah, so the kind of idea behind the game is that you are a gladiator, called we call them Hadrida. It's basically like a mercenary. You're fighting for other people,
Okay,
and you're
okay.
in an arena or kind of whatever setting you want to tell the story in.
Yeah.
And the idea is you start with 60 health in a 1v1, and your
Okay.
goal is to beat your opponent by reducing their health points below 0 or to
I
0.
see. Okay.
And then one of the fun things about our game is because it's a first person game, one of the cool things that you can do is kind of team battles. So rather than just 1v1 or like one kind of battle royale style where like everyone's just fighting everyone, uh,
Yeah.
on my favorite format is tag team, which is a 2v2, or we also
Hmm.
have squads, which is a 3v3. And
I
the idea
see.
is it's like the teamwork between players can add to your role. So it's a very like team
Oh,
based function,
I
which
see.
I love a
Okay.
lot. It's super fun.
I see. I see. I see.
Mhm.
How long does usually each of the game last? Like
Sure.
an hour, or what is the
So
typical time?
when you get to the, I'll say competitive level, meaning you've played the game a couple of times and maybe you're just doing a game with friends or you're at a tournament,
Yeah.
we do 3 games in a 1v1 setting in 45 minutes. So a
Oh, okay. Okay.
typical
Okay.
game or a match time is 45 minutes and you can get 3 games in.
Okay.
Sometimes you don't finish the third game and then just whoever has the most health in the third game will win. And then we also have in multiplayer formats, the games do take a little bit longer because there's more turns to go through.
I see.
And that's one game in that 45 minutes. So it
I
can be
see.
anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour for an individual game.
I see. But that's a fairly fast paced
Yes. Yeah.
game.
Yeah,
So.
we have a what's called a high card velocity, meaning that
Mhm.
each turn that a player takes, everyone is drawing cards, and you use a lot of cards on your turn. So cards are going in and out of combat pretty fast. So
Mm.
yeah, it feels very quick when you play with people who know the game. You can take turns that are like 5 seconds long. It's just like I want to attack, I know my plus, and then I roll my dice, and then everyone waits for the dice to settle to see what the roll is, and then you move on to the next roll. So it's pretty quick.
Yeah, I think one of the hardest part when it comes to game developing, obviously
Mhm.
there's the design element. There's
Sure.
also the rule and the balance
Yes.
between the
Yes.
cards,
Yes.
especially in the trading card game. There's so many different cards. Like how much of a play testing do you did to decide on the current like balance between the card and the rule and the kind of a mechanic of the game?
Yeah, absolutely. So we did about a year and a half of play testing for our first set,
Oh,
which was
okay.
absolutely crucial. We went
Yeah.
to PAX West, Rose City Comic Con, and LA Comic Con with
Okay.
our beta cards. And the
Okay.
idea was we had the core idea. Again, the game has always been with dice. We knew the numbers on the cards. But the main thing is we had to figure out how cards interacted with other cards in ways
Mm,
that I didn't intend for them to work out. Because
I see.
as a designer, you may
Yeah.
build something into the game thinking this is what's going to make the most sense. And then
Yeah.
in practice, when people either don't know the strategy or they come up with a new strategy, sometimes it breaks certain game functions. So
That's true. Yeah.
there were a couple of moments where I remember at PAX, we were on the end of the first day and I
Yeah.
was watching 2 people play and they didn't understand how to draw resources correctly. So
Yeah.
then they kept saying like, "Oh, the game is so slow." And I was like, "Okay, I have to take that feedback and figure out a way to make it easier to understand so that
Mm.
they feel like the game is faster. I didn't really change anything about the game. I just made
Mm.
it feel faster, and it
Mm.
overall has improved the game a ton. So those early stages of about a year and a half of feedback was absolutely crucial.
I see, I see, I see. And because your universe have multiple different format, not just the trading card
Yeah.
game. That's also, I think, there's also animation you're working on as
Yes.
well. Can you also
Mhm.
talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So one of the first forays into this project I actually took after the initial writing stage
Hmm.
was developing a project called the Kylian Archives, which
Hmm.
is an anthology series. It's somewhere between 15 and 20-minute episodes that will be posted onto YouTube. And the
Hmm.
idea is I wanted to show people a bunch of different aspects around Kylia's history. So
Hmm.
different characters. For example, the first story is focused around a character named Helios and his friend Arthur, and they're pilots of a ship called the Wraith. And they
Oh,
stole
okay.
an artifact and they're flying it out of a country to try to like bring it to the person who paid for it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of like the first thing that I was doing. And it's been a ton of fun. But right now I'm solo animating the project, which was amazing because if I wasn't doing that, I probably wouldn't have got the success we got early on. Because when you
Mm.
post, hey, I'm solo animating this project, you get a lot of views because people are like, oh, I'm interested to see kind of if you can pull it off.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
posted a couple of videos on TikTok of my early animations.
yeah.
And then I woke up one day and one of them had like 1 million views, and we had like 1,000 followers at the time. And then
Mm.
just like overnight, we got like 20,000 followers came in. And I
Oh,
was like,
whoa,
wow,
okay,
people are
okay.
kind of connecting with this universe and they're interested to
Yeah.
see what stories we have to tell. So
Mm-hmm.
then that was kind of the first sign where I was like, okay, I got to animate more, I got to do more, and kind of, broaden my scope of this project so that I can make this truly something special. So yeah, animation
Yeah.
is definitely something that I'd love to do. I wish I had more time in the day, but honestly, it's
Mhm.
a lot of business stuff that is bogging me down right now. So it is what it is.
Yeah, because you also need to balance on everything else as well
Yes,
besides
yes.
animations.
Hmm.
So, and I know with the very unique world background was a mix of being like in the medieval
Yeah.
setting and sci-fi. How do you keep the balance without like overwhelming the player a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting, and what we've noticed too is like everyone in their mind has a different understanding of what both of those genres are just in general.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, I know some people who like I heard a guy online and he was arguing that like Star Wars really isn't sci-fi, and I was like, okay, I mean, I don't know, maybe we have different definitions of sci-fi, but to me, it's
Yeah,
sci-fi.
yeah.
So one of the things that I like to do is um one the core aspect of a world building project is you kind of have a baseline and then everything kind of stems off of that. So as
Mm,
the creative director for the project, one of my main goals is just to keep everything in line with the core ideology of the world. So for example,
mm,
there are places on Kylia, in the kind of grander scheme of things, where they would have higher technology, and there are
okay.
places where they would be more into that like medieval sci-fi. They're still
Mm,
using swords. They have like torches and candlelit, things. But
mhm,
one of the main ideas is you kind of have to keep those two things feeling connected
mhm,
by shared principles and by shared kind of like world building things. So if, for example, we have a thing called Bolor, which is a crystalline energy source. Essentially, think of it like a crystal battery that people use.
mhm,
So in the medieval place, they still may use that, but they would use it in a more primitive way, just for light. Whereas in the
mm,
more sci-fi way, they would use it to run ships and guns and different things like that. So
I
my
see.
main goal with the project is to keep everything kind of aligned.
Mhm,
And because of even if you think of our world, right? Like even today, there's so many different levels of technology. It'd be
yeah.
really hard to just to say like this is what the average human experience is like. So for me
Mhm,
personally, my main thing is just I have to show people like here's where this belongs and here's where this belongs, and
mhm.
hope that it feels kind of grounded into the story. So
I see, I see, I
yeah.
see. And I know one thing you are also really trying to focus on is like fan involvement. That's why you go
Yes.
to a lot of trade shows. How
Mhm.
are you bringing your audience into your the world you're building currently?
Yeah. So this is kind of a core philosophy of the World of Kylia as a project. If nothing else, the World of Kylia is just kind of a background for people to again tell their own stories.
Mhm.
So everything that we do, including our animation, including the comic, and including the card game, we always try to incorporate fan engagement into the process.
Okay.
The idea is that the project is a fan-driven project, and we want people that dive into the world, learn the lore, they're able to tell their stories, and then I can kind of incorporate them in. So one of the main things we do is, since I started the project in like 2021, we've had a Discord that allows people to kind of learn about the project, and then again we do kind of like role playing events where
Mm.
certain people will make characters, and then their characters will try to solve puzzles or talk about a certain project, and then whoever wins will get either points in the server, or they'll eventually get mentioned in other projects.
Mm.
So two things to note with that. One of our big events 2 years ago, I believe, the winner of which got their character into our card game.
Mm.
So the Heart of Malik is one of the most famous cards in our game. It's honestly one of my favorite cards in the game. And it
Okay.
was actually a person who had won a competition we had done, and then
Oh,
got to
wow.
design their character, and then they drew it, and then they sent it in to us, and then we redrew it in our art style, and then incorporated them into the lore of our project.
Oh,
So
wow.
now
Okay.
that character is, forever a part of Kylia, which is
Mhm.
awesome for both of us, because when I think about like when I started the story, that's all I ever wanted to do. Making my student films back in the day or whatever. It'd be like, oh, if this was in
Mhm.
Star Wars, or if this was in this other project, it'd be so cool. And now people have that opportunity with us.
Mhm.
And then on top of that, there's also people in our server that kind of make these factions or groups of players that will kind of act like they belong to this faction identity. And then when we're working on the comic book, for example, because the characters are kind of moving around the world, you get to
Yeah.
see pieces of that in the background. So
Mm.
the group that
Okay. Yeah.
actually won our last event, they're called GNTC,
Yeah.
the Greater Nations Trading Company.
Okay.
And they were talking with me after the event, where they were like, all we want is one of our casinos to be in the back of one of the shots of the comic. And I'm like, absolutely. Again, like, those are things that I'd already be
Okay.
doing, and instead of me
Mm.
just calling it, whatever, naming it after them when they are actively participating in the world would be just way cooler. It's like a way better story, and it makes it feel more real, because now there's a
Mhm.
history behind this one background piece, because I know what happened in
Mhm.
the event. So that's kind of
For
what I
sure.
try to do with fan engagement.
For sure, for sure. Yeah. And thank you for sharing that story
Yeah,
of how you get people involved.
yeah,
What are some of the feedback you are getting from, let's just say, retail store and like people you're meeting at
yeah.
the trade shows so far?
Yeah, it's been fantastic. We're really lucky that we've been able to go to as many events as we do. Honestly, we go to around like 10 a year, and I go to things as small as like little toy cons, which have, like 100 vendors and maybe like 2,000 people that go to them. And I get to
Mhm.
really talk to people for, 30 minutes to 45 minutes at a time, and learn
Mhm.
about their life, what they like about projects, and really get, into the nitty gritty. And then we also got invited to like New York Comic Con, which is one of the biggest conventions in the world. And there's
Mhm.
like 200,000 people there. And we were right next to like Yu-Gi-Oh and stuff. And it's just like,
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, you get a little bit of every experience. So
I see.
getting feedback and seeing people get excited about the project is
Mhm.
honestly like my favorite part, because a lot of times if you just design kind of like at your house or whatever, you're kind of isolated from that feedback, and it's very easy to
Yeah,
just be, you don't know exactly if things are working or if they're not working,
that's
because
true.
you don't get that like immediate feedback. So I honestly
Mhm.
love going to events. And then the other thing, which has been awesome, is the fact that stores have believed in the project as early as they have. A lot of
Mhm.
projects take a good amount of time to then get into stores,
Yeah.
because obviously within the card game space, and a lot of game space honestly now, there's a
Mhm.
lot of volatility. So games will come
Yes.
out, and then it looks like it's going to be good, and then it just dies off, and it's kind of gone,
Yeah.
and people forget about it.
Mhm.
And what I always tell people is like, I've been working on this project for 10 years. So like, this isn't going to be something that's going to come out and just die. Like, I'm going to keep doing
Yeah.
this no matter what. So stores have been extremely
Mm.
receptive towards that, and we work with them to try to do special events. And one of our stores, Discordia Games, which is in Bremerton in Washington, I
Yeah.
was talking to the owner, and he was discussing some of his problems with other games, and kind of me pitching him the game. He was like, there's some things that I see in the game that I wish were different in terms of product packaging, so that I
Mm.
could do draft tournaments, which in the TCG world is basically, normally the way draft works is you would go to a store and you would buy a couple booster packs, you would sit down and play the game.
Yeah.
My game has a very unique mechanic where, instead of paying for a card with like a mana source, you actually play like Go Fish. So you're looking for matching pairs of that card. So
Hmm.
in a booster pack where you get 15 random cards, that didn't work. So when I was talking to him, I was
Oh.
like, I know you're interested in this kind of format. I wish there was a way that we could do this. And we sat down for 2 hours and then designed a product called an armory deck,
Oh,
which
whoa,
is
okay.
10
Yeah.
cards and you get 4 copies of each card. So the idea is this is basically a randomized kind of like playing card deck where you
Yeah.
can take this out of the box and instead of having to buy multiple packs, you can just open this, shuffle it up, and then play with some friends random, or you can draft for events. So whenever I sell these products, I think of the store owner. But again, if I was, hard headed or didn't want to listen to feedback, I would have just been like, oh, we don't need draft. And then now it's been a great product for us. So
Mm.
talking to people in the space, talking to fans, it's always great because they give you feedback that is from their perspective, and then you can incorporate that and make that experience better for them. So,
I
yeah.
see, I see. Have you considered licensing your IP out to other company and make even
Yes.
other like
Yeah.
merchandise as well?
When we were like really early on, that was right when Magic started doing their Universes Beyond, kind of part of their project.
Mhm.
Um, and it's interesting because like one of the things that when you get to that level, like Magic, or there's a couple other
Yeah.
game like Weiss Schwartz or
Mhm.
Union Arena who do license, either other projects licensed to them or
Mhm.
like vice versa. But one of
Yeah.
the unique things that we kind of have is that like intimate touch where we can tell stories and like all of the players we have the ability to talk to,
Mhm.
and everything comes from us to them directly.
I see.
So
Yeah.
that is one of our like biggest strengths, I think, right now. So at the
Mhm.
moment we're not really thinking about licensing out the IP, or
Mhm.
again the inverse where we take another product and kind of like put it in our game.
I see. I
But
see.
really building up like a strong core identity for our project where we
Mm.
have control is kind of one of our main strengths right now, and kind of want to hold on to that.
I see, of course.
Yeah.
So what is next for the IP? Like what is
Mhm.
your goal for 2025 and beyond?
Yeah, so 2025 will see the set of our the launch of our second set, which will be super exciting. It has 121 cards, which is over 40 more cards, or around 40 more cards than our first set. So we've definitely
Mhm.
like kind of hit our stride, I think, in game design. We've
Oh,
also
wow.
added 30 new artists to the team, which is absolutely phenomenal.
Oh, whoa,
And
that's a
we have
lot.
some side by sides, yeah, of
Yeah.
art from set one where we were really rushed. And
Yeah.
again, we didn't know how successful we would be, so the budget was extremely like non-existent essentially.
Yeah.
And now we've been able to kind of like develop and cultivate an artist team, which is awesome.
Mm.
And the goal is basically just to take everything we're doing, but then speed up the timeline that we're doing it. So the idea is we want to be pushing one comic a month,
Oh,
as well
wow.
as
Okay.
a set every year. So one art set
Okay.
would come out, and then the comic book would be coming out, and then my end goal is to eventually also have a full animation company in house that I can work with to make the live action kind of or not live action, but the feature film style TV shows kind of
Animation. I
bigger.
see.
So
Okay,
we have a
that's a really
lot of big
ambitious
plans
goal.
for 2025. Yeah.
And a lot of things on the horizon as
Yes.
well. And
Mhm.
on the marketing side, what are some of the marketing projects you're working on right now?
Sure. Yeah. So some of the big stuff that we do right now is all through social media. That's
Mhm.
kind of like our bread and butter.
Mhm.
TikTok has been huge for us, and then Instagram is kind of like the second one.
I
But
see.
specifically in 2025, one of the things that we're hoping to do is increase our brand activity on platforms with longer form content. So things
Mm.
like YouTube.
YouTube.
And
Okay.
then our main strategy has been short form content because you can get so much engagement so quickly. But
True.
it
Yeah.
takes when you do it individually, it takes a long time because you have to come up with the idea for the video, then you
Yeah.
edit the video, and then it's like 7 seconds. So it's like a lot of work for not that much payoff. So
Yeah.
our goal is to transition to a YouTube style where we develop
Mhm.
longer form content on YouTube and then edit
Mhm.
the longer form content down into digestible bites and then post it back onto social media. So
I see. I see.
we're transitioning kind of into more of a long form content, which I'm also a fan of because again, I like filmmaking. Where on TikTok,
Yeah.
it's mostly just memes and like small clips of animation. I can do like more cinematic, videos. So
For sure. And how about promoting the trading card game that you have? What is the some of the strategy you are currently working
Yeah,
on?
so we have a list of influencers that we're talking to and we'll be talking to for the summer before our second set. The idea is, again, we want the game to be in as many people's hands as possible and
Mm,
then have them give organic feedback of kind of how they feel about the project. And then if there's any cross promotion with their audiences who play other card games or board games, even for that matter, to kind of bring them into the project. And then we also have in June our Worlds tournament where we're inviting a bunch of players and then also probably game store owners to an event for SummerCon in Washington where they can
oh, okay.
play the game and then again compete in a tournament and then film a lot of long form content for that. So yeah.
I see. I see. That's a very decent
Mhm.
strategy as well. And as well, kind of wrapping up today's interview, the
Sure.
final question I like to ask the guests is: if you have to share one piece of advice with someone that's just getting started within the toys and game industry, what would
Yeah.
that be?
Oh, that's tough. I'd say the biggest piece of advice that I always give to game designers is before you get into the weeds, like before you get fully designed, have artwork and all that, try to stay in that first design level as much as you can and really figure out the identity of your project.
Hmm.
Because if you have a very good core foundation, it's very easy to build from that point. But what I see
Mhm,
a lot of designers do is they take from another project or they don't make the game feel super unique and then they get to the end of
mhm.
production, then they realize that they have to go back and like change
Change
everything
it.
and it's
Yeah.
very hard to do that.
Mhm,
So don't feel like you have to rush into like I need to make a game in like these 4 months. Because in my opinion, like when I was doing my game, 4 months in, all you could do in my game was roll a single dice. Like I had to figure out the math
wow.
of what
Yeah.
mathematically I have there's a website called Any Dice, and I was looking up like charts of what the probability of rolls are to try to balance things out.
Mm,
So I would
okay.
definitely again just make sure you have a core idea that you're proud of and you want to
Mhm,
work on for a long time and then
mhm.
develop it from there. And again, don't be afraid to ask for help. When I was doing my first set, we had again a very limited budget. It was at the end of COVID, the economy wasn't doing great, and I
Mhm.
basically met a bunch of artists and I was like, hey, here's my vision for this project and I would love to
Mhm.
have you work with me.
Yeah.
And again, a lot of people are scared to kind of reach out to other people for help, but
Yeah.
without
Yeah.
doing that I wouldn't have gotten to where I am. And again, I owe the 11 artists and everyone else that helped me on this project like the world, because without them this project wouldn't be in the state it's in. So yeah.
Of course, of course. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that as well.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for being on our podcast today and sharing your background and
Yeah.
your story within the toys and game industry.
Yeah,
Where
absolutely.
can people, where can our listener find you online?
Yeah, so if you go to www.worldofkylia.com, that is our main website, which has all of our information. It will have links to the comic when it's out. It has the TCG and the rules, as well as it will have the animation. And then if you ever ask questions or want to know more about game design, I'm always willing to talk about that. We also have a Discord server, which will be linked on the website. And
Mhm.
then I also run a game design server called Indie Card Labs where I talk about game design with friends and we kind of develop games and help each other with kind of this learning process.
I see. Thank you so much for sharing. We'll make sure we put that in the show
Yeah,
note. And again,
absolutely.
thank you for your time
Yeah,
today on the podcast. For our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Toy Business Unboxed podcast. We hope you have enjoyed the conversation and find it insightful and inspiring. If you like what you have heard, be sure to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform so you never miss an episode. We really appreciate your support and would love it if you can leave us a review and share the podcast with your friend and colleague. For more resource tips and the latest update within the toys and game industry, visit our website at toy-launch.com. Join the conversation and connect with us on social media using hashtag Toy Business Unbox. We'd love to hear your feedback and suggestion for future episodes. Until next time, keep innovating, keep creating, keep bringing joy to toys. This is Jason Shea signing off on the Toy Business Unbox podcast. We'll see you in the next episode. Thank you so much, everyone.